There's a crisis in our prison system.
Inspectors described it as the worst jail they'd ever been to.
UK's jails are in a parlous state.
This shows the change in self-harm, assaults and deaths in prisons over the last 10 years. Each has risen significantly.
Prisoners afraid to leave their cells. Staff discovered asleep or locked in their offices.
Today, the UK's prisons are chronically overcrowded, with many having to share a cell designed for only one person.
Massive overcrowding, violence, a drugs problem, and inmates self-harming.
The UK locks up many more people per 100,000 inhabitants than most of our Western neighbours, which all comes at a total cost greater than any other nation in Europe. And despite paying this hefty bill, the system isn't working. For every 10 who leave prison, 4 will re-offend within the year. And 5 years down the line, 7 of the 10 will be reconvicted.
Such repeat criminality is taking its toll on families, victims, and the taxpayer.
So, how do we get to this point? And what can be done to solve the UK's broken prison system?
The prison population has grown.
Overcrowding crisis.
UK's jails are in a parlous state.
Let's be clear. Prison works. It ensures that we are protected from murderers, muggers, and rapists, and it makes many who are tempted to commit crime think twice.
That's Michael Howard, then Home Secretary. And this speech is the start of the story, which explains how we got to today. Throughout Conservative rule in the 1980s, the UK had experienced a decade-long rise in the level of crime. This, combined with a number of high-profile cases, made Howard determined to tackle the issue, fearing trouble at the polls should he fail to do so. And his solution was simple: increase the use of prisons. See, Howard believed strongly in what criminologists call deterrence and incapacitation. He thought that simply by sending more to prison for longer sentences, people would be deterred away from committing crimes in the first place. And he felt that by keeping more criminals in jail for longer, they'd be isolated away from society, unable to continue to commit crimes, hence incapacitated. And so, under the logic of deterrence and incapacitation, Howard vowed to increase Britain's use of prisons. And that's exactly what happened. When Howard gave his speech in 1993, the size of the UK's prison population was relatively low. But, under public pressure to get crime under control, Howard declared that prison was to be the solution, vowing to greatly increase their use.
Prison works.
The prison population soared as the government passed laws which increased the use of prisons and the length of sentences. And there was no change when Blair entered office.
We should be tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime.
The prison population kept on growing and growing, as successive Home Secretaries passed a series of reforms which introduced ASBOs, raised minimum sentences, and increasingly made prison the default punishment. Whilst the last decade has seen a flattening off, the prison population is predicted to reach nearly 100,000 people by 2026. What Michael Howard had done back in 1993 was issue an entirely new mindset, which measured results not in the level of crime, but in the number of prisoners locked up. But the question we have to ask is whether this prison-first approach really was worth it to reduce the UK's level of crime. At a first glance, you might be mistaken for thinking that the prison-first strategy was a success. The UK's crime rate did fall over the last 25 years as the prison population increased. But crime rates have fallen in several Western nations, some of which have actually decreased their prison populations. It's unlikely that general deterrence reduced the crime rate, with some experts arguing that there's no evidence that increasing imprisonment reduces crime. And while incapacitation did play some role, it is estimated this accounted for just 4% of the fall in crime. And so, it doesn't seem like the UK's experiment to increase prison populations really has delivered the results Howard desired. The consequences, however, have been catastrophic. Following the logic of deterrence and incapacitation, prison sentences have grown rapidly over the last 30 years. This, combined with the increased use of prisons, has created an overcrowding crisis. A 2022 report finding that 52% of all prisons in England and Wales were overcrowded. The large number of prisoners has also created a situation of staff shortages. In just 2021, 1 in 7 of all prison officers left the service, many feeling unsafe due to an increasing number of assaults. Limited staffing has meant, even after the pandemic, prisoners are routinely locked up for over 22 hours a day and has created an absence of purposeful activity, such as work or education schemes. All of this considered then, this graph starts to make more sense. And the high likelihood of reoffending, which plagues ex-inmates, doesn't seem so surprising. But This all begs the question, what if there were another way? This is Norway. Here, they have less than half the number of prisoners per 100,000 people than in the UK, and it has one of the lowest crime rates in the world. Their secret? Rehabilitation. Rehabilitation aims to put inmates onto a path to recovery. Whilst incapacitation works by simply keeping prisoners locked up, unable to commit crimes, rehabilitation aims to reform inmates, offering them education and guidance, setting them up for a life away from crime. Then, they can be released as fully functioning members of society, keeping the number of prisoners at manageable levels and limiting the cost of the prison system. Norwegians use the phrase, "Who would you want as your neighbour?" It was decided that if prisoners were to be released, they should be rehabilitated, since they might one day live next door to you. Educational programs within prisons were set up, and prison life was redesigned around a principle of normality, attempting to replicate life outside. As a result, today they have one of the lowest recidivism rates in the world. If we are truly to solve the UK's prison crisis, then we need to consider the purpose of the entire system. It's time we stop thinking of prison as the solution, but as a means to rehabilitate.